Good afternoon, Sheffield. My name's Louise, and today I'm joined by my friend Natasha Farrell, and she's going to talk about her experience in the foster care system. Hi, Natasha, how are you doing?
Hi Louise, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good, yeah, good, thank you.
Wonderful.
Is there anything that you'd like to let the audience know at first?
Well, I think I decided to do this just from the point of view of we're at a stage where I think there's a lot of conversations that we need to be having over loads of subjects, really. But I think one of the main things within our culture in particular is just foster care, adoption, and social services in particular. My story is quite a big one. A lot of people don't know it, so I think it was just taking the opportunity to sort of tell my story and let people know that you can come out the other end of it, but also just to open people's eyes and try and get people to understand what it's like to be within social services and under that care. And especially when it comes to our culture in particular, because it's something we just don't particularly talk about.
Yeah. How old were you when you were you fostered first?
So I think, around about 18 months. I was young, and I was taken away from my biological mother, who was a teenager at the time, unfortunately, and she didn't have her own support network around her. So unfortunately, she struggled to take care of me. Social services stepped in, and I went straight into foster care first, which was a pretty safe place, quite nice. And then went from foster care into other foster parents that then moved into an adoption. And that was sort of Dinnington area type. If I'm not sure if people are aware of around there, but I suppose it's in between sort of Rotherham and Sheffield.
Okay. At what age are you when you realise that you're not really settled?
For me, it was pretty easy for me to notice it, just from the point of view, obviously being a black child. I had the foster parents that I had were both white. Both sets of foster parents were white, and then the foster parents that then adopted me were a white family. So from that point of view, I was very aware I was different. I wouldn't say so much as I was aware I was adopted, because I think words like that you don't really understand at that age, but I knew I was different. And obviously the area in which I lived was predominantly white, so I knew from a very early age I was different.
Okay. Was there any connection with your biological mom during that time?
No, not from my point of view. I now am aware that when my adoption went forward, that my biological mother did contest the adoption, but that didn't really make any difference. I think back then, although biological parents could say that they weren't happy about it, I think social services were a law to themselves, so they kind of made the choice.
Okay. What was your experience like in your first home where you were settled for a few years?
Not great, unfortunately. So going to this family in particular from a young age, they had two boys of their own, and so they were a married couple, but he was never there. I now only probably in the last few years found out that he was actually having an affair at the time, so he was just not around at all. So the care predominantly came from her, and unfortunately for me, I think she, for some reason, although chose that she wanted a daughter, I obviously wasn't the daughter in particular that she wanted, and so therefore, unfortunately for me, I was abused under her hands for quite a period of time. It was something that social services were aware of. They were making their notes that things were really unsettled. But unfortunately, that service that was there to protect me just didn't. So although there were several issues right up until the point of the actual adoption going forward, I was never really settled. And I think when my biological mother contested the adoption, I think that made things worse. And then the adoptive mother became more abusive towards me. And I think that was, I don't know whether that was her, from her point of view, that, you know, the adoption wasn't wanted by everybody. And she just kind of took it out on me. So I had eating issues, and she dealt with those in physical ways. And then, unfortunately, one night occurred where she was mega stressed out. I'd got remember when you used to come home from infant school with a book to read? So I'd got a book to read, and she used to teach maths outside of school to teenagers that were doing GCSEs. So she'd got a class coming in, and she was mega stressed. She was rushing around. I needed a bath, so I was taken into the bathroom. I was told to turn the tap off when the water hit a certain level. And as a kid, I wanted a bubble bath. So she left the bathroom, left me in there to watch the water. When the water hit the level, I turned the tap off, as I was told, and then I ran into the hallway because I wanted a bubble bath. She just hit the roof and sort of grabbed me by the scruff of the neck, dragged me into the bathroom, lifted me, and basically just let me go into this bath of water. And the water was so hot that it just ripped away at my skin. I screamed, obviously, because I wanted to get out. She wasn't happy about that, so she pushed me in 2 or 3 times until her hand hit the water and she burnt her hand. At that point, I was still in the bath trying to get out myself. Obviously, I was only 4, so I was only little. And as you know, bath sides are quite deep. Eventually, she tried to lift me out of the bath, but the damage to my skin was quite bad at that point. So as she was lifting me, the skin was coming away in her hand, so I was then slipping back into the water. And then eventually she decided to pull the plug. She did the usual of splashing tepid water or whatever else, and then the family doctor was called, and I was rushed to Rotherham District General with 3rd-degree burns that covered 40% of my body.
Was she looking for a way? Okay, so when your when your biological mom's contesting the adoption, the foster care, is your foster mother, is she willing to let you go at some point?
No.
Because I'm wondering, is she harming you as a way to alert other people that you're in danger and you need to?
No, I think it was more because my biological mum had contested the adoption. I think the foster mother became angry at that because I think she was the type of person that it was her way or no way. And
she wanted to keep you though.
Yeah, so I think it was the fact that because she wanted the adoption to go forward, but the biological mother had said no, although the biological mother didn't have any pull on that decision, I think she then sort of took that as, well, I'm going to go forward with the adoption, but now I'm not particularly happy with taking this child on, but I'm going to do it anyway. So it was almost, I suppose for me, I was almost punished for the fact that my mother wanted me back.
Yeah.
And really, in reality, when you think about that, you would think that the foster mother would think that was fantastic, that the biological mother wanted the child back. But in whatever warped way the foster mother was thinking, she wasn't happy. That made her angry that somebody had gone against her decision. So therefore, I was to pay for that decision. And the abuse started small, in small ways, as it does, and it obviously got bigger and bigger as time went on.
Yeah. So when you say small ways, you did mention eating. What was going on with the food situation?
So eating, for me, I don't really ever remember an issue with eating, but apparently when we sat round the table as a family, I was a slow eater. And to be honest, I would probably say now I probably still am quite a slow eater, probably because I chat a little bit too much when I'm eating. But generally, some people eat slower, some people are, faster. I was just slow as a child, and she took that as, I suppose, in a way, I was causing problems then. I was dragging out the meal. And it just got to the point where I would be the only one sat at the dinner table and everybody else would have cleared the table, and she used to get frustrated at that. And so her answer to that eventually was to feed me separately from the family. And that was done, number one, just so that the family didn't have to put up with any disruptions, and number two, so that she wasn't seen to do what she was doing. And what she was actually doing was she would fill my mouth full of food and then take her two fingers and stick her fingers into and then pushing the food down my throat. And that was, for me, was every meal for a period of time. And then eventually I think she got tired of that and then just kind of stopped feeding me in a way.
Stopped giving you food to eat?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Were there any moments of love and care that you got from her? I mean, she's tortured you in the bath.
I don't particularly remember any softness with her at any time.
No remorse?
No. I spent obviously a lot of time locked in my bedroom, away from people, especially after the incident with the bath. When I came out of hospital, that was almost, I think, number one, it was almost then an embarrassment.
Because your wounds were visible?
Yeah. And so I was bandaged up from my waist down. And from that point of view, I think she'd at that point already stopped taking care of me. So she wasn't brushing my hair, she wasn't creaming my skin. And unfortunately, when you burn skin, especially when it comes to burning black skin, it reacts very differently. And because of the percentage of the burning in your skin, you have a lot of natural oils. So when you burn that away, you need to keep constantly putting that back. So a lot of that care sort of went out of the window. So I was unkept. I didn't look well. So therefore, she didn't, when people came to the house, visitors, family, she didn't want people to see that. So I was sort of locked away and became sort of hidden in a way. And if I did go out on the street, people talked where we lived. It was a small village. And as we know, with small villages, everybody knows everybody. Everybody's into each other's business. So half the village knew that there was a child in the village that was being abused. Everybody knew it. People were talking about it at school gates. Kids were talking about it. Neighbours were talking about it. The school teachers, the nurses, the shop owners, everybody knew about it. And because everybody knew about it, some people kept quiet about it. Some people made comments, and there was, pointing and whispering, and it just got to the point she just didn't want to deal with that. So more and more I was hidden until she then made a decision that I needed to go.
You mean leave her care?
Yeah. So for a period of time after the incident, and I came back to the family home, she then decided with the social workers that I was becoming a disruption to the family unit, and that they needed, the family needed a break and a rest from the situation.
Is this around your 4 years of age?
Yeah, so I was, can you believe it, 2 weeks away from my 5th birthday when the incident happened. So my birthday I had in hospital, to which I do remember that day because I spent most of that birthday on my own in a hospital bed, because very rarely did she visit me in hospital when I was in there. I started at Rotherham District General because the incident was so bad and had caused so much damage. The doctors there didn't have a clue what they were doing. So I was then blue lighted from Rotherham District General to the Children's Hospital in Sheffield, where there was then a specialist that I then dealt with. But even then, it was a shock to everybody. Nobody'd seen the extent of damage, and especially when it came to black skin. So although burns were understood, when it came to black skin, there was a lot of knowledge that wasn't there, because obviously, as I was saying earlier, because of our skin tone, the texture, the way our skin burns, we keloid, and it's almost like a scar upon a scar, so it sits above your skin, so it's something that can't be hidden. They tend to bubble up, they tend to purple and brown, and it'll shrink and it'll tighten, and so they had to find a way of being able to deal with that and be able to allow me somewhere in my body to be able to grow, because obviously I'm still a baby. So I've still got a lot of growing to do, and so they needed to be able to work that out. So I spent a lot of time in hospital, but also a lot of time on my own, because through that whole situation, that was blamed on me. So she told the doctors, and she told anybody she could tell, that I got in that bath on my own. And she changed her story maybe 3 or 4 times, and to the point the story was written down and it was typed up and it was documented, but nobody spoke to me. Nobody asked me what had happened. Nobody asked me how I felt. Nobody asked me what I needed. It was all about her.
Were there no suspicions of...
There were a lot of suspicions. There were a lot of people.
A lot of people are aware of it.
Yeah, no one really. There was only 2 or 3 people that stood and said they didn't believe the stories that she was giving. I think from my point of view, I was let down horrendously from people that were put in place that had the knowledge, or even when it came down to doctors, because when you read little bits of information that I have got in my paperwork, you can read one page which covers one conversation with one doctor that will go from the doctor saying he's suspicious to he's not suspicious to he's suspicious.
The same doctor.
The same doctor. And this is in the same conversation. So it's, what was happening is I had a lot of adults that were surrounding me, but nobody, excuse my language in a way, nobody had the balls to actually stand and say, no, this was abuse. I can see it and I'm standing by it. A lot of people were scared, so quietly they believed it and they said it was abuse. But when it came to publicly and putting their name down and writing a signature, then they looked after themselves. It was their career, or whatever they thought people were going to think of them. But there were 2 or 3 people that really stood for me, and one particular person that I would probably love one day if I could ever go back, if he was to ever be alive, was the principal of my infant and junior school. He was very clear that I was being abused, He, to the point when these things happen and it comes to social services, the police have to get involved because they need to see whether the law's been broken. A whole group of people get together and they all have their meetings and they all discuss whether they think this child is at risk or is not at risk. And the weird and strange thing about my whole story is they have these meetings and there's a lot of people that go to these meetings and agree that I am a child at risk. And so therefore I am put on an at-risk list.
Yeah.
But yet the decision is then to place me back with the family that I'm at risk with. And that probably, from that, I kind of just felt that little bit of flash, because that's really confusing. So you're saying I was at risk, you're accepting I was, and you make those movements and place me on that list, but then you put me straight back into the place where I'm at risk, where I'm being abused, where I'm in danger, and you don't do anything about it. And the person that actually does do something about it is the abuser, who then says, I can't cope with this, so therefore I need this child to go somewhere so that we can have a few weeks off so we can decide what we want.
So the power's back in her
So
hands.
the powers were always in her hands.
Yeah.
And so I was just a child that was left with all these people put in place that were supposed to protect me that do nothing other than make decisions, write things down, and then go home and live their lives. And I'm just constantly put back into these situations and allowed to, drift, see things I shouldn't have seen at the age that I saw. And not just that, but to be a child of that age and then to be blamed for everything that's happened to you as well, and to be constantly told it's your fault and it's because of how you are or how you look or how I acted, and to be told that I deserved it, and to be never told, in actual fact, you didn't deserve it. It wasn't your fault, and it wasn't an accident either. And it's always been listed as an accident.
Do you then carry, what feelings do you carry now then as a grown woman?
Frustration, anger, hurt, acceptance.
Do you feel like what they were saying about you being to blame?
That's the one thing I struggle with every day, because at a young age, the first 7 years of my life, I was being abused. And I was being told that I'm nothing, and I'm being told that I'm a waste of space, and I'm being told I'm a devil child, and I'm being told I'm manipulative. All these words that children don't particularly understand to start with. But when that happens for that period of time, and nobody in that period of time takes you to one side and says all these things that are happening to you are being said aren't true, you go into your adulthood with that in your head.
You internalize.
Yeah. And it's very difficult to then step out of it. So for me, it's a constant battle with my thoughts, because that is a constant thought in my head, and I constantly have to battle. No, that's something that's been placed in your head. That's not you. I have to try and remember that that's another voice.
Yeah.
I think my issue is because she has never been held accountable and social services have never been held accountable, I've been left in a state of abuse. It's like I'm still living under that abuse, because nobody in that official capacity has said, this was not your fault, this is not your fault, and the things that you were told aren't true. Because those things throughout my entire life have been backed, that has constantly told me
Yeah.
that these people were right. And I'm now 47 years old. So I've spent 40 years battling every day with, am I a good person, am I not a good person, am I a good person, am I not a good person. That's exhausting.
Yeah. It's you've been programmed to
Yeah.
not have full confidence and doubt in yourself.
Yeah.
How old were you when you left that house?
So I was permanently, I think it was just after my 6th birthday. I was in the children's home twice. The first time I was in there for a few weeks, and I came out of the children's home and went back to the family. And then she placed me back into the children's home, and I was there for maybe 2 or maybe 3 weeks. And then one afternoon came, and I was told I'd got a visitor. I was taken to the main office. I was sat on a chair. The adoptive mother came in. She sat across from me, and she basically said, "You're staying here. We don't love you. We don't want you. You'll never see us again."
We, as in the whole
The
family.
whole family.
Did you have siblings in the family?
So at that time, and this is another weird thing about the whole situation, also, as I said earlier, she had 2 boys of her own that were biological to her and her husband. But as I was going through the first sort of year of being abused, she then adopted another child, another daughter. The difference between me and this other child was, although this other child was classed as dual heritage, she was dual heritage of some kind of, I think, Polish descent. So obviously she was white. So she blended with the family.
Okay.
And so therefore, when she came into the family, I was isolated even more and was pushed out even more. So my abuse wasn't great then, but it got worse when that child stepped in. And then, as I said, eventually I was then told, "You're not wanted." And so that was it. I kind of remember that day because I remember her walking out. I remember me just sat in the office, and then I remember somebody just coming into the office and telling me to go play.
Was there not another adult in the room? They just allowed her to come in, even though they've known that there's some abuse going on.
Yeah. I was never really, until stepping out of that children's home, I was never protected from anybody. Nobody, as I said, nobody spoke to me. It's like I didn't exist. Or if I did, I was just something to push around.
Okay.
My existence started with my second adoptive family.
Okay. Was there any respite? Was there any ease within that first household? Was there any kind of comfort? I mean, you're a young child, very young.
Yeah, the transition wasn't easy because obviously I came from. So while I was in the children's home, obviously I was still on the at-risk list. So at that time, my parents, who I call parents now, they'd got a son of their own biologically, and they'd already adopted a son. And they were in the process of wanting to adopt again, and they'd actually gone looking for a boy because they'd got 2 boys. But because I was on the at-risk list, generally social services will try to obviously home those children that are in real danger of experience really bad things. And so when my parents went in for their first meeting, the social work actually discussed, we've got a child that we desperately need to home. And my mum and dad said, okay. So that was kind of my first step into coming out of there. But there's always a process. So unfortunately, what used to happen is I would be in the children's home Monday to Friday, and then on the Friday I would go to foster parents, which I do actually have fond memories of a lady who used to call her Auntie June, and she was a lovely older lady, her and her husband. So I would go to her house. Friday, I would stay Friday night and Saturday night, and then Sunday I would go back to the home. When my parents made the decision that they wanted to adopt me, they then start the process of fostering first. So I then start to go from the children's home Monday to Friday to my mum and dad's on the Friday night.
Okay.
And then they would take me back to the home on the Sunday. But I think within 2 or 3 months of that happening, it became very traumatic for me, and it became very traumatic for them to keep having to take me back to this place. So eventually my mum and dad, the type of people that they are, pushed hard enough to push this process forward. And it was sped up, and therefore I was then taken out of the home and then started a long period of foster care with my parents. So I was then with them on a full-time basis until then moves were made for the adoption.
Okay, that's good. So you start getting affection and proper care. Were you, I mean, you'd met them while you were still in the care home. So how was that for you then, getting a totally different type of treatment?
It was scary because the first time I met my parents and my brothers, I was at my foster parents, and I'd been told we were having visitors. So I was put in a nice little dress and my hair was combed and whatever else. And
looked like you being cared for.
Yeah. And so I don't really remember being told much other than a family were coming to visit. And so when there was a knock at the door, and I remember going to the door and opening this door and seeing, to me at the time, was the biggest black man I'd ever seen in my entire life. And you know what, Louise, the sad thing is, that was the first black man I'd ever put my eyes on. So up until that point, I thought I was the only one that existed.
Wow.
So for me, that was my world. It was my colour skin, and then everybody else was white. So to see this man stood at the door scared the living daylights out
really?
of me, and I shot from the door. I ran to the back of the sofa, and I stayed behind the sofa for maybe about half an hour, to the point that the boys had to come round the side of the settee and kind of coax me out of the settee. And eventually when I did, I think I sort of just sat for a period of time and sort of stared at him. And I just, everything about him, his hands were huge, and he had this beard, and his hair was the same as mine, which I just couldn't get my head around. And then obviously the boys, so the eldest, he was darker skinned to me, so that was a fascination. And then the other boy, he was lighter skinned but still similar to me. So again, it was a that first visit, I think I was just so fascinated that there were people that looked like me. I just couldn't get my head around it. And I just remember laughing a lot. And I remember eventually my dad picking me up and me thinking that I must have been as light as a feather. The way, the way he sort of scooped me up. All these sort of things were so new to me. I'd seen them happen because obviously outside of the house I'd seen kids being picked up, but it had never happened to me. So all these things were new, and a house full of laughter was new to me. The boys running around and smiling, and them having toys, and all of it was new because I'd got nothing. I'd barely got clothes, never mind toys. So the whole thing, and I remember seeing my mum and looking at my mum and thinking she looked dainty and small but pretty. And the whole afternoon was just amazing for me. And I remember them leaving, and I remember my mum giving me a really big hug. And I remember my dad making a point of whispering in my ear that he would see me again. And I just remember holding on to that.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they were gone. And coming down from that was really strange. And then I don't think I really hung on to it, because I think I got so used to people coming and going that I don't know whether it was something in my head where I thought, do I believe they're coming back, or whether it was just, that was nice, and then sort of, that's that.
Do you think it had anything to do with the value that you had in yourself at that time?
I don't think I was really aware to that extent. I think it was just more seeing something nice for the first time, seeing a family unit that seemed happy. And it's kind of weird, but it's almost like, it's not a smell, but maybe a sense of seeing a few people together and sort of seeing that bond between them. I'd never really seen or felt that. So for me, it was more, is that possible?
Right.
Is that actually real? Because in my world, it just wasn't. So I think it was sort of hoping that it was real, and hoping that maybe I might experience that again if I was good. Because in my head, it was always, if you're extra good, because I was always told I was a bad child.
Some conditions to getting something nice.
Yeah.
So did you see your first foster family ever again, or was...
I did. I was one of those kids, I think because I was, from an early age, I was really aware of a lot of things that had happened to me, and I was aware that the things that had happened to me were wrong. I knew they were wrong. And so I suppose I was a child and an adult all at the same time when it came to certain things. And I went to my parents, I was 9. And I remember going to my mum and dad and saying I wanted to go back and see her, because I wanted to ask her why she did the things she did to me.
At 9 years old?
At 9. I was very clear about it.
So it's something that you talked about with your new foster family?
Yeah.
Were you adopted at this point?
I was adopted at this point, yes. So I was settled. We were still having issues. I mean, my mum and dad had to pick up the pieces from all that. And that wasn't easy. And back then, when it came to social services and support, there weren't any, really. And the support that my parents did get was horrendous. And I only found that out a few years ago, just from having adult conversations with my mum and dad, and them starting to open up about, we didn't get help. You know, we had to do a lot of things on our own. And when they did try and get help, it was, I mean, I remember Dad saying the first time they were going to take me to the Caribbean, and they just wanted a little bit of advice, because I'd never been out of the country. I was a young child. I was covered in scars. I'd been through a lot of things. Yeah. And so they went to, I think it was a therapy session, and the therapist basically turned around and said, well, if I were you, I'd leave her and you go on your family holiday. And my dad just went, we're done. We're done. Said to my mum, get your bag, get Natasha, we're done. This is ridiculous. We'll do this on our own. Yeah. So for me, it's always been a weird one. Yeah, it's just always been a weird one. But because I was aware of it, I decided I wanted to go back and just see what she was going to say.
Did it help?
No. Because I think, I suppose in a way, I kind of knew I wasn't going to get what I wanted. even at that age, I kind of knew. So going back, I remember stepping into the house and her trying to play that it was just so wonderful to see me again. And I remember it even at that age thinking,
Fake.
yeah, this is fake. What am I doing? And I remember sitting on that sofa and saying, trying to ask her why, what did I do that made you feel that you needed to do something? And she more or less wouldn't discuss any of the abuse except for the incident. And for her, she was adamant it was an accident. She felt really bad about it, blah, 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 to the point she then sat and started putting family videos on, of holidays and things. And I remember and I remember sat thinking, why? Why? And I remember I actually went with my social worker, and I remember very quietly saying to my social worker, I want to go home.
Oh, okay.
So and it was me who said, I'm done. This is not doing anything for me, and just wanted to leave.
Yeah. So I thought that you'd gone with your new adopted family.
I wanted to. I wanted to go with my mum. And when my social worker contacted this lady, I mean, I'm not, obviously I have to be very careful giving names anyway, but even in general, when I talk about her, I won't give her a name. I just won't give her any power.
Yeah.
So when I say to people, I have to sort of explain, when you hear me say her, it's general. I'm talking about my abuser rather than she just doesn't deserve a name.
Okay,
but when I requested I wanted to go back to speak to her, I also said I wanted to go with my mum. And when the social worker went to speak to her, she said she was happy to speak to me, but she refused to sit in front of my mum. And me and my mum knew, and we talk about even now, I'm not surprised. Why would you want to sit in front of a mother like my mother, who is caring and nurturing and loving and protective, when you've done what you've done? A mother to a mother always knows. You can't hide that. And so my mum didn't really want me to go on my own, but I think she felt that I had got enough about me to be able to go and do it. And when I look back, I'm glad I did it, because I think she needed to know that I was very aware that the things that had happened to me weren't right. But it didn't make any difference at all. And I'm sure for her it will have just been, another day.
Yeah. It sounds like she was prepared. No matter what, she wasn't going to speak about it, regardless of who was there with you.
Yeah.
Okay. So the foster care system, it needed improving back then. And I'm wondering if, what changes have been made.
I mean, I have to be very careful, because obviously I don't work within the services. I only see what I see, and from conversations, and there's a lot of groups on Facebook and stuff now, so it's becoming something that people are talking about. Back in my day, it wasn't talked about at all. It was almost taboo to talk about it. Whereas at least now we are starting to have conversations, but I think especially within our culture, we don't talk about it. But yeah, it predominantly affects our culture and our race, which, number one, is very sad. Number two, I don't particularly agree with it. I think it is attached to a lot of things, as in, we've had issues with the slave trade, we've had issues with racism in general. I kind of feel like when it comes to things like this, our culture, for some reason, we are ripped away predominantly a lot more from our parents than Caucasian people are. And I'm not sure why that is, other than the fact that we are depicted as not very bright, we don't work hard, we're lazy, we've got all these issues that we put on our children and blah blah blah. And I think a lot of it is misunderstood, but I think it's misunderstood because as a culture we don't talk within our culture to each other, neither do we talk outside of our culture for other people to understand us. But I also think we're also seen as a second citizen, so what does it matter if we rip a few children away from parents that we think, oh, that, I mean, my biological mother, yes, she wasn't the greatest. She was 17 years old. It's not the greatest of age to have a child. But there is a difference between a child that may not have the designer shoes or may not have the designer nappies and things like that, but a child can still be well looked after and loved. It's just it's done in a different way. Now, I understand that as I said, my biological mother, she had her own issues, and that's the other thing that we need to look at. We always need to look behind that other person. And she had a family unit where her dad was an older parent and her mum just didn't want her. So again, that has a roll-on effect.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so from that point of view, I kind of feel my mum needed support. She didn't need her child ripping away from her.
Mm-hmm.
She needed somebody who was going to come in and say, no, this is how you manage your money.
Yeah.
No, this is, yes, you can go out, but we need to maybe find a babysitter that's got this about them or this about them. Or, show these young mothers that there are places you can take your children when you need respite, because every parent, and I hate this when a lot of people say, oh yeah, but once you're a parent, you just deal with it. No, you're still a human being. Just because you're a parent, sometimes a parent needs respite. It's just as simple as that. To be able to take care of your child 100%, sometimes you'll need time for yourself. But some parents haven't got that around them where they've got that, so they end up losing control. For me, a system needs to be put in place before social services get involved, and maybe we wouldn't end up with loads and loads and loads of people that have been in the system that have come out more messed up than they were when they were with a biological parent.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it seems to happen an awful lot where the story turns out not to be a great story and they were actually in a better position with the biological parent than they were when they hit social services.
Yeah, that's right. There's also the fact that your biological mom may have had more children, so that's siblings that are torn apart as well.
Exactly.
The grandparents. Sometimes, why not go to the grandparents? Yeah. In my situation, that's what happened to me, luckily.
Yeah.
So things need to change.
Yeah, definitely.
And these conversations, and this is why we're talking, need to be had.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Is there anything that you would like any advice that you'd like to give to anyone that's going through foster care as a black child, or maybe, oh gosh,
it's a difficult one.
It goes deep. Yeah, it can go really deep. What would you say to anyone going through a rough time in foster care?
What I'd say is, look, it's not easy. It's never going to be easy. I'm not going to sit here and go, now I'm 47 years old and everything is absolutely fantastic. No, it's not. Number one, especially when you're taken away from your mother, a bond is broken. You never get that bond back. It's not something that you can go to therapy for. It's not something that somebody somebody else can come in and fix. Once that bond is broken, it's broken. And what people need to understand is that mother's carried that child for 9 months. You're part of their body. And so when that child is born, as you know, that's an extension of yourself. To break that bond, there is no glue in this world that can fix that. And there is no amount of talking about it that can fix it. But talking about it can soothe that pain.
Right.
And then it's also about loving yourself as well. And that's really difficult when you've come from that, because having that bond broken, you can't help but think, is it because I wasn't worth loving? Did my mum not love me? Mm-hmm. I ended up in the system not because my mum didn't love me or because my mum didn't want me. It's because my mum couldn't cope. She didn't know what she was doing. It wasn't anything to do with a want. And a lot of us grow up with that. So that's number one. We have to stop and try and understand. And this is why I always try and say to people, always look behind the person. So when it came to my biological mum, I looked behind her. Where did she come from? What did she have to deal with?
Exactly, yeah.
And once I've done that, that's given me an understanding of her, but also a part of myself as well. Yeah. So that has helped soothe me. But a lot of it for me recently is talking. Especially again when it comes to my culture, and I will just keep saying it, is we don't talk about it. We talk when we're growing up in our families and in our culture and within our friends. You don't talk about these things. You don't talk about your emotions. You don't talk about your mental health. You don't talk about relationships. We don't talk about anything that's important. And that causes problems because when we don't talk, there's no understanding to anything. So we judge each other on what we're physically showing rather than what's in your heart. Yeah. And the only way we know what's in people's hearts is if you have those conversations with people. Yeah. And the other thing is, especially when you come from where I've come from, and it's been an abusive childhood, what you're doing is by not talking is you're protecting your abuser. And that's what we're telling each other to do. Don't talk about it. Keep it quiet. Don't chat about it. You can't talk about things like that. What if so-and-so knows? Yeah. Those sort of things. But what you're actually doing is you're protecting those people that have hurt and damaged you. Mm-hmm. And I've spent 40 years doing that. So while I've been in a cage under my abuser and under the people that were supposed to protect me, all these people have gone out and lived their lives. And a lot of them have had quite fulfilled, happy, comfortable, financially settled lives, whereas I'm still trying to fight to keep my head above water. And that's purely because I don't live and walk the same path as a lot of other people do because of what I came from. And it's not, I need to say to people as well that are like me, it's not, I don't use it as an excuse and never have used it as an excuse, but it is a part of who I am. And I am getting to the point now where I'm starting to surround me with people that accept all of it, not just parts of it. Because I've also done that. I've gone through relationships. A lot of my relationships have been with blokes that have picked and chose the bits that they like of me. And then those parts that are dark, they've either ignored or they've used to manipulate and to control. And so what's happened with that is it's put me straight back into that abusive state. Yeah. And because I'm so used to being in that, you don't always recognise it because you've become used to it. It's become a part of who you are. Yeah. So I would say to anybody that's going through what I've gone through, or is going through it, or knows somebody that's going through it, talk about it. But talk about it out of love and out of care. Don't judge. If somebody wants to scream and shout while they're telling their story, let them scream and shout. If they want to sit and cry while they're telling their story, let them sit and cry. don't tell them that emotion's wrong or that emotion's wrong or the way you're carrying yourself on that's wrong, because I've had that in a relationship as well. And that was a very big, profound, I mean, he was the love of my life. Which when again, talking about it, you start to hear what you're saying. And every so often you say something and you hear it back and you think, well, that's ridiculous. How can this guy be the love of my life? But yet, every time it came to talking about my childhood, number one, he couldn't cope with it, didn't know how to deal with it. And number two, he couldn't cope with the fact that I was comfortable talking about it.
Okay.
So he would use that in certain ways. And again, in a way, that's abusive. Again. So it's just being aware that probably the person that you sat next to, probably one of your friends or even a family member has probably experienced something very, very similar. And it's just not talking about it because they don't feel that they're comfortable enough, or you're comfortable enough, or it's a safe space, or they should even talk about it.
Yeah. So there's a lot of shame and guilt that we can carry into our adulthood because of the treatment of people who are supposed to love and protect us.
Yeah.
And it's just not being done. And there's no one with clear instructions, and there's no laws by the sound of it.
No. And it can be, I think, I have a lot of people that look at me and because you don't see it, you don't see the abuse, people just think you're normal, whatever normal is. But then when you do open up, you get all kinds of reactions from people. Some people can be like really shocked and just be like, what? I've known you for like 20 years. I did not know half of the things that you're telling me. But that comes out of because you taught to keep it like it's a dirty secret, and it's not. It's carrying the shame. I just lived a long time being embarrassed and being ashamed of the things that have happened to me. But I'm getting to the stage now where I'm like, I shouldn't be.
It's not yours. That's right.
It's not mine to carry. It's what happened to me. It's what somebody else made those decisions on my life. Now I'm just having to live it the best way I can. And I try to do it out of love and care. Sometimes it can come out in different ways, and I also accept that. I also talk about it because abuse is happening all around us, especially when it comes to kids. And when it comes to kids, they're very innocent. And we as adults, as all adults, whether you're a parent, you're not a parent, you are responsible to keep your eyes open for children because they are innocent. And it takes you to open your eyes and to pay attention, because more than likely, nearly every one of us has been around a child that is being abused right now. And we've seen it, we've thought it, and we've carried it and not said anything. But yet, what I'm now saying to people is, if you see it, speak on it. Who cares? You might upset somebody, but better you upset somebody and you're upsetting an adult, but yet you're protecting a child. Who's more important in that story? Because for me, the child is. So for me, if I see a kid running around and I notice a bruise you just notice something that's not quite right, pay attention, because more than likely there's something happening. Because for me, I was a black child. Black children, we bruise. It's just that you don't see it. You see it in shadows and little bumps and things. Now, when I look back at certain photos that were taken of me, I can now see black eyes and big bruises. But I needed people to really look and really pay attention. And if people had paid attention, then maybe I might not have been sat having this conversation.
Yeah, you would have been out of that home way sooner.
Yeah.
And also you would have probably got some justice some way or another.
Exactly. Now I've got to live at 47 for I don't know how many other years, really without justice. And that's a hard life to live, knowing that somebody made a decision on your life that has and will affect my life until the day that I die. And it's affected everything. It's affected my relationships. It's affected my careers, everything. I mean, I wanted to model. Never been able to do it. I mean, fortunately for me now, things have moved on a lot, and now you have got modelling agencies and stuff that are taking on people that, you know, are bigger girls, that are scarred, that have got skin conditions and everything else. But back when I was coming up, which would have been my peak, I couldn't do that.
That's right.
You know, I did a lot of sports. I competed right up to like 18. Could have gone to Olympics. I didn't, because I became aware of how I visually looked and thought, I don't want to go in changing rooms and everybody be staring at me every time I got to put my leggings on because I'm going on track and things like that. So I just think, yeah, if we can start having these conversations, we might be able to help a load of kids that are in the system, but it's also helping adults that have been through it that are not really talking about it. Maybe they want to talk about it. In this, I'd say, listen, a lot of people, especially in Sheffield, know me. I'm hoping doing this that it's probably opened the window to my life, and I'm sure a lot of people that are going to watch this are going to be probably a little bit shocked to some of the things that I've talked about. But again, it means I can now walk out in the world and breathe easy because I've got nothing to hide anymore. And that is the most amazing feeling after 40 odd years of constantly hiding people that have hurt me. I don't have to hide anymore. And that's why doing this, even though it's brutal and under this jumper I'm sweating, but I'm also smiling because in reality, the more and more I do it, the more and more freedom I'm getting from my abusers. And that's what I desperately needed it, I desperately wanted it, and I desperately deserved it. And that's me believing in me. I deserved it, and I'm doing it for me. And that's why I'm saying, just if you've experienced what I've experienced, or you've lived similar, or you've got your own story, go out and start talking, because the world we're living in right now we're in a real mess. So I'm just trying to pick a tiny piece of the world and just make it a little bit nicer for the people that are in my world, and I hope I can continue to do it. And I just think, Louise, this is an amazing thing that you're doing, and I just hope more and more people come forward and talk to you and open up, and maybe a few of us can heal.
Lovely. Well, thanks for your braveness.
You're very welcome.
Honestly, I'm honoured. You're my first my first guest on this podcast, on this YouTube channel. So yeah, I appreciate you, Natasha.
You're very welcome.
Yeah. Bye everyone. Thanks.
Bye.